This is a reading from the book Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Ananda. Week 6, the importance of soul receptivity. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Chapter 1 of the Gospel of St. John states, "But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name." This was a passage Paramahansa Yogananda often quoted to his disciples. "Be in tune," he would tell them. "Delusion can't touch you if you will keep in tune. A few of you will fall," he said once, "but it needn't be if you would stay in tune." Of a disciple who became highly advanced, even though she didn't meditate much, he said, "She got there by attunement." To one who found meditation difficult, he said, "I will meditate for you as long as you stay in tune." Truth is a state of consciousness, not a well-worded definition. It is in that consciousness, above all, that our lives are transformed. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 10th chapter, "To those who are ever attached to me and who worship me with love, I impart discernment by means of which they attain me. Out of my love for them, I, the divine within them, set a light in them, the radiant lamp of wisdom, thereby dispelling the darkness of their ignorance. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind." Om. Om. Om.
Hello again. Good morning, everyone. We'll start out with a reading from Whispers from Eternity, Ananda's book of prayer, demands and poems. And today I will read number 185, "I want to be thy bird of paradise. With golden plumes of spiritual unfoldment, with the softest down of tender feeling, and decked out in a costume of color and graceful beauty, I am thy sole bird of paradise. My wings, sped by the eager desire to progress, beat their way through life's somber skies in continuous search of the paradise of peace. Despondency has sometimes daubed dark colors on the fragile feathers of my bright, sunny mind. Oh, bathe me, thy bird of paradise, with the cleansing sun rays of insight, and soothe me with thy soft singing melodies of peace." Well, today's reading, we're talking about attunement. And attunement means to bring into harmony. That definition really speaks to the spiritual path. We're always trying to bring ourself, our soul nature, into harmony with God, with the creative consciousness of the universe. I had a really interesting moment of awe and wonder this week. I talked about it in my yoga class because it was so beautiful. We live in the middle of the turf farms. And for a few days in a row, there was a flock of starlings floating around the trees and landing in the grass, more than 100 of them. And one day, as I left my property, I noticed in one of the fields, there was a perfect 360-degree circle of birds. And when I say circle, I'm not talking about a loosely organized circle. It was a perfect circle, and it was bigger than this church. You could fit the church inside of the circle. And the birds were all facing out, and they were pretty evenly spaced, and they were eating. And it was so beautiful. and so unusual that I stopped my car and I watched them for about 5 or 6 minutes, and it made me feel so joyful. And, you know, when we think about the birds and the animal kingdom, they're really in attunement with the creative consciousness of life. They're in that rhythm, the natural rhythm. And what separates us, we're also part of that rhythm. That rhythm flows through us as well. But what separates us is our ability to reason. We have a high faculty of reasoning. We have a high intellectual capability. And those things are really connected to the ego. And because of that, it pulls us out of that natural rhythm of nature. You know, the way that the birds know how to fly south in the winter. They don't think about it, it just happens, or they know where to go for food and that type of thing. They're led by a very deep intuitive wisdom. And we have that within us as well. But on the same level, because we're human beings, we have the ability in this lifetime to reach liberation, because through our own free will, we can choose to make God the pole star of our life. Whereas the animals and the birds, they go through a natural evolution of consciousness. They just keep repeating incarnation, keep coming back until they reach human form. But by the time we're humans, we have that power within us. It's just a choice we have to make to stay in attunement. And our reasoning and our intellect block us from that. How many times have you had an intuitive moment where that intuitive wisdom within you or from above gave you guidance, and right away your ego jumped in and said, oh, no, that's not what I want, and you didn't follow it. And then in hindsight, you realize that you should have followed that deep guidance that we all have within us. So I thought the bird circle was an anomaly, and then I noticed the same thing the next day, but it was on the other field next to my house, the same thing. And it really got me thinking about magnetism, you know, and I thought, what is it that's forming this circle? Is there some electromagnetic current in the earth? Is there something in the sky? What is it exactly that's causing this? And I don't know. We don't know. I'm sure maybe someone who studies birds could tell us. But it got me thinking about magnetism in general. And spiritual magnetism is a result of our soul receptivity. It's when we let our ego consciousness take the back seat and we let our soul receptivity, our soul wisdom drive our lives. When we think about, we know that you can take a steel bar and take a magnet and keep stroking it in the same direction and magnetize that bar. And it's the same thing with us. When we think of God, when we love God, when we pray, when we meditate, when we take God with us, with everything we do, we create that magnetic flow of the Christ consciousness, or that creative consciousness of the universe. And we ourselves become magnetized. We attract others to us, you know, through that vibration of God's love and peace that we carry within us. Yogananda, I'd like to read something. He said, when you put your mind on God, the supreme magnetic force, you surcharge yourself with divine magnetic force. If you think of God in deepest meditation, if you love God with all your heart and feel completely at peace in his presence, without wishing for anything else, the divine magnetism of God will attract unto you everything you had ever dreamed about and much more. He goes on to say, if you love God for his own self, not because of what he can give you, and you have unconditional love for God, he drops thoughts in others' brains and they become instruments to fulfill even your unspoken desires. And that's really beautiful. And I think we've had that experience before when we're in attunement with God. That's what we call grace. If we have a need in life, someone comes in and fills that need for us. And we know it's through the divine grace of God. You know, everyone is an instrument in our life. Everyone comes to us, or God comes to us through other people and experiences. And as Master said in today's reading, be in tune, and delusion can't touch you if you will keep in tune. So attunement isn't anything mysterious. It's just what we put our attention on. I'm watching my daughter right now prepare for college admissions in the fall, and she's going to be auditioning. And so has a lot of energy into the music she wants to play, and she's practicing and thinking, and it's so so wonderful to see that, that attunement to this one particular thing. But as devotees, whatever we're doing, we need to do it with God, so we can attune ourselves to our jobs, our families, whatever it is that we're interested in, even hobbies, but we always want to bring God with us and keep God as the fundamental presence in everything that we do. Going back to the circle of birds, it must be really hard to be a bird in New England in the winter, especially a day like yesterday, but I don't think they feel the cold. I don't know, although Roy said he had to get his peacocks in the barn because they're from the south. But we realize that, sorry, I lost my place here. Oh, okay. So going back to that natural rhythm, there was something within these birds that they knew that on that day, at that time, in that place, they would find something to eat. That's why they were there, basically. So that's going back to that natural rhythm of this consciousness that we're part of. And when we do that ourselves, when we stay in attunement with God, we get that abundance consciousness ourselves, where we don't live in fear anymore. We can let go of fear of having our needs met, because when we're in that consciousness of God's vibration, we know that everything we need will come to us exactly at the time we need it. And I'd like to talk a little bit about someone who was 100% in attunement with Yogananda, and that was Sister Gyana Mata. She was a nun. She started out as a wife and a mother. She met Yogananda a little bit later in life, and when they first met, he said to her that they had been disciple and guru in a previous incarnation. They had immediate connection. And she also had a very, very deep, deep attunement to Jesus Christ. She really felt the presence of Christ in her life. So the thing that's remarkable about Gyana Mata, and I'll make a little plug, out in our bookcase, we have some used books, and her book that is called God Alone, and we have a couple of copies, and it's a beautiful book to read. She suffered a lot of physical pain in her life. She had a lot of illness and pain, and she never gave in to fear, and she never complained about the pain. She just put her mind on God at all times, on Christ and on Yogananda. There's a story where at one point she had a heart attack, and then she had some other very serious health crisis. And at that time, Yogananda was traveling around the United States, and she used to mentally follow him. She knew where he was going, and she would mentally follow him. And she didn't ask for much, but this one particular time after the heart attack, she wanted just to ask for his blessing. And she sent him a letter. He was in New York City, she was in Seattle, and she calculated how many days it would take for him to receive the letter. And on that very day, in her meditation, she felt the Om vibration move through her. She felt her chair shake. She felt the house shake. She thought that it was a truck moving over the cobblestones in front of her house, but then realized there was no truck, that it was Master sending her a healing vibration. And she had a great healing that day in her body. But that's what attunement can do to us when we have that one pointed concentration. Another story about Sister, there was a group of visitors coming to Mount Washington, where she lived later in life. And she was there to greet them. And as they entered the door, they came in the middle of them, she saw Christ himself. And she dropped to her knees, and she said Christ walked over to her and put his hand on the top of her head. And she actually felt the pressure of his hand on her head. That's how in attunement she was with Jesus. As soon as she felt that, he disappeared, and then she was on the ground looking at these visitors who were totally baffled by what had happened. But that was the power of her attunement. And she also had great spiritual magnetism. She attracted people to her because of her vibration of peace and love. And she even had magnetism with animals, just like Saint Francis. When she was out in the garden in Mount Washington, the birds would come around and different animals. And there was one little young skunk that took a liking to her. And the skunk used to follow her all around the gardens. And one day he followed her into the administration building right up the stairs, and everyone was put on alert. And then when she realized that the skunk was there before he let out his special perfume, she walked him right back into the garden. But it's such a great example. For those of us who have pets, we know as soon as we sit to meditate, our pets are attracted to us, aren't they? They come right over and they want to be with us, because when we put ourselves in the vibration of the Christ consciousness, we emit that vibration. And the animals, again, going back to the birds, they're in that vibration, but in a different way than we are, not as consciously, but they feel that. And it's this attractive energy that pulls them to us. It's so beautiful. Swami Kriyananda, when he first came to Master, to Yogananda, had a lot of questions. He had a very active intellectual mind. But he said that whenever he was in Yogananda's presence, he couldn't remember any of the questions. And that happens to us too when we meditate. When we're in meditation, we might think we have prayers, we have supplications, things we want to ask God for. But when we go deep in meditation, focusing on Christ or the Guru, it just evaporates because we realize everything's perfect the way it is. Other masters' disciples talk about this as well. Ram Dass talked about his time with Neem Karoli Baba in India, and he said he would write down a list of questions he wanted to ask him. And then when he was sitting with him, he would crumple the questions up because he couldn't remember why he even wanted to know those things, because when he was in his presence, that vibration would just, it takes over, it comes through us, and we get into that harmony, into that attunement with that vibration. So that's what attunement to God does for us. It puts us in this stream of God's grace where we experience everything as perfect just the way it is. And it helps us get out of fear consciousness. It helps us just realize that everything at this moment, in this time, is exactly as it should be in our lives. But as soon as we go back into ego consciousness, that sort of disappears for us. And we start to, again, go into that loop of, will I have enough, or what's going to happen, or I'm not sure I want that. So it's just really important to be in the present moment, to stay with God, keep that intuitive presence, keep that pole star of God's love within your heart, within your spiritual eye. The Bhagavad Gita today: to those who are ever attached to me, who worship me with love, I impart discernment by means of which they attain me. Out of my love for them, I, the divine within them, set alight in them the radiant lamp of wisdom, thereby dispelling the darkness of their ignorance. So letting go of ignorance. So with an open heart and a receptive soul, we can really stay in attunement with the divine vibration, just like our friends in the animal kingdom, the bird kingdom. We can get to that point where we're really flowing with that beautiful stream of grace. But again, because we're human beings and we have free will, we can really go far in this incarnation. We can really set our mind on liberation, on love, on devotion in a very, very powerful way. So, we just want to stay in attunement. We want to talk to God, ask God for guidance, and then listen to the answer. Because if we listen and to the intuitive wisdom coming through us, we'll know exactly what to do at the right time, in the right place. And that's what soul receptivity is all about, is just staying in that flow of divine grace and feeling the energy of God flowing through our minds, through our voices, through our hearts, through our hands, and letting the gifts of grace come to us in our life.